Fox News. Breaking news.
The Supreme Court just dropped a bombshell that has Democrats absolutely panicking. In oral arguments that had the courtroom erupting in laughter at the absurdity of the left's position, conservative justices signaled they're ready to strike down laws in up to 29 states that allow mail-in ballots to be counted after Election Day. And Justice Alito laid it plain out in English that even a child can understand. And when the opposing attorney tried to claim there could never be voter fraud in Chicago, the entire courtroom burst into laughter. And what happens next could fundamentally restore integrity to American elections forever. So think about what this means for you and your family and the American voter. For years, you've watched elections results flip days and weeks even after Election Day. You've seen candidates declared winners suddenly become losers as mysterious mail-in ballot dumps rolled in from who knows where. And California keeps counting ballots for weeks, and 8 states don't even require a postmark, meaning there's literally no way to verify when a ballot was actually cast. As Associate Attorney Harmeet Dillon said it plainly, we don't have an election day anymore. We have election weeks, election months, and that creates chaos, uncertainty, and a massive crisis of confidence in our democratic process. Every other civilized nation on earth manages to count their votes on Election Day. France does it, India does it with over 1 billion people, but somehow America, the greatest nation ever conceived, can't figure it out. The establishment doesn't want to figure it out. That's it, because the chaos serves them. But the Supreme Court just signaled that the game for them is over. And speaking of protecting what matters most, your vote and your financial future are both under attack right now. New numbers out of Washington show inflation is on the rise again. Another threat to you, your savings account, and your retirement. And ask yourself an honest question. Does your dollar go as far as it did 10 years ago? How about 5 years ago? Or even just last year? While politicians play games with our elections and our economy, gold has stood the test of time for thousands of years. If your portfolio lacks exposure to gold, one of history's most reliable economic hedges, it's time to rethink your strategy. And gold has kept up with inflation and in many periods has far outpaced it. That's why I trust Noble Gold Investments. So head to nextnewsgold.com right now, and when you open a qualified account, you'll receive a free 10th ounce American Gold Eagle. That's real gold in your hands. Don't let Washington's chaos destroy your retirement. Protect yourself at nextnewsgold.com. Now let me show you exactly how the justices dismantled the left's oral arguments in this historical case. So here's what this mainstream media does not want to tell you about what happened in the courtroom. And Justice Sotomayor thought she had the perfect gotcha moment. She tried to use Bush v. Gore against the RNC's attorney, arguing that military ballots would somehow be invalidated. But the RNC lawyer absolutely destroyed her argument, explaining how military voting laws work differently for primaries, runoffs, and special elections. She was left with nothing. And that wasn't even the most embarrassing moment for the left. Wait and see what happened when Chicago voter fraud came out. That's going to be hilarious. Let's get into it, guys. From Ken Sorbo, we have the Supreme Court has hinted that it will strike down laws allowing mail-in ballots to be counted after Election Day. This is common sense, and if other countries can count everything in a single day, so can America. Let's see.
We have lots of phrases that involve 2 words, the second of which is day. Labor Day, Memorial Day, George Washington's birthday, Independence Day, birthday, and Election Day. And they're all particular days. So if we start with that, if I have nothing more to look at than the phrase Election Day, I think this is the day in which everything is going to take place, or almost everything. And then we have 3 points in time. 1844, 1872, 1914. And we can ask, what would people have thought on those days is meant by this phrase, Election Day? Which of those should we choose? Which of those dates should we choose?
Well, I think you could choose any of the 3. I mean, honestly, I think the single best one, if you're just going to choose one, is 1872. And the reason I say that is because 1914 is the latest in time, but that's the one that Congress gave the least thought to.
I mean, the Democrats are arguing points that have been on the books for hundreds of years. And we've figured this out repeatedly throughout the course of time. They're talking about a time when we were right after the Civil War and we had 2 presidents that couldn't get elected. They technically went to a backroom meeting and figured it out. And that had congressional and Supreme Court implications for how that goes. So as Justice Alito questions the sanctity of Election Day, even shedding historical light, the courtroom debate takes a humorous turn when the attorney dares suggest about ballot integrity in Chicago. As being a Chicago resident myself, I can tell you, it is not that strong. So Libby Emmons stated that laughter erupts in the Supreme Court when the attorney arguing against mail-in balloting suggests there could never be voter fraud in Chicago. Let's see.
You have 8 states that don't even require a postmark. And there is nothing in Mississippi's theory that turns on the existence or the non-existence of a postmark. And that's probably a good thing because the Post Service has made clear that they don't even postmark all of the mail. And postmarks have their own problems. I mean, the main mailbox, post office in Chicago stays open 24/7. So when all the other polls close in Illinois or every other state at 8 p.m., the post office is still open till midnight. Now, I'm not here to say that there could ever be voting fraud in Chicago, but the possibility that there's a 4-hour window where people can go get their ballots, absentee ballots postmarked after all of the returns are in, and they know that, oh, this is the election where these things could turn the result, that does not seem entirely
So is your argument that we can...
So by the time they get into Chicago, postmarked at midnight, right? So they got to go from Chicago, then they get mailed down to Will County or DuPage County or any of the collar counties around Chicago. That takes another day or two. Then they have to get into their processing room and then counted. It could stretch this process out for weeks, and that is something that we've been complaining about. So while laughter took center stage at Chicago's voting practices, Justice Sotomayor steps into the fray, challenging the GOP and drawing parallels to historic cases like Bush v. Gore, where the hanging chads were a big issue. From Rothman, saying, Sotomayor tried to save late ballots with Bush v. Gore. She got destroyed. Today, the Supreme Court Justice Sotomayor thought she had a killer gotcha. If the GOP is right, that ballots must reach election officials by Election Day. Let's see.
You believe that absentee voting by the military and overseas voters, the various laws, that federal laws under which states have proceeded with respect to those votes are illegal?
No,
or they're not saying what everybody has understood them to say, that states can accept absentee ballots after the election?
So
military and overseas ballots?
I don't think any vote is unlawful. Let me try to address how I think you would reconcile UACAVA with the Election Day statutes. And to start, I think it's important to recognize that UACAVA is not limited to the federal general election. So UACAVA applies to primary elections, to runoff elections and special elections, and federal general elections. The Election Day statutes only apply to the general federal election. So the way I would reconcile the two is to say that all the references in UACAVA to state deadlines are perfectly fine, not preempted at all, not displaced at all, not even anomalous. With respect to the primaries, the runoffs, and the special elections. Then the court has a job to do in the federal general election as to say, like, kind of which is the specific, which is the general. I think the more logical way to do it would be to say that with the understanding in this court, if you decide in our favor, that for the federal general election, the ballots have to be in by Election Day, I would say...
Maybe we should have another president now, because wasn't it in Florida that they were counting military votes after receipt?
So with all due respect, that is the reddest of red herrings, because what happened in the 2000 election in Florida is that pursuant to a consent decree that was entered by a federal court because Florida was violating the principal provision of UACAVA, which says you have to give the absentee ballots to the overseas voters 45 days in advance. Because Florida was violating that, there had to be a consent decree to create a remedy that was not provided under...
What happened was that the judge made up the deadline, not the state.
That's the problem. These rogue judges decide deadlines should be going in there. And when nobody challenges those judges, that becomes case law. That becomes historical precedent, which is what the Democrats love referring to at all times. So with Justice Sotomayor trying to resurrect arguments from Bush v. Gore, the stakes escalate further as we learn that nearly 30 states could be rocked by the Supreme Court's impending decision. From our friend Eric Dautry, he says, holy crap, as many as 29 states may have their laws overturned after the Supreme Court indicated they will rule against allowing mail-in ballots to come in after Election Day. And let's see.
Justices are wrestling with a question about whether states can count ballots received after Election Day in a case that could have an impact in nearly 30 states that allow some kind of grace period. The RNC is challenging a Mississippi law that allows ballots to be counted up to 5 business days after Election Day if they're postmarked by Election Day. Justice Alito was among the biggest skeptics during Monday's arguments.
Independence Day, birthday, and Election Day, and they're all particular days. So if we start with that, if I have nothing more to look at than the phrase Election Day, I think this is the day in which everything is going to take place.
But Justice Kagan questioned the impact of that logic on practices like early voting.
It seems to me it's a rule that prevents early voting, because you're basically saying there are two things that have to happen, and they have to happen on Election Day.
Meaning the casting of the vote and the receipt of that vote. But attorney Paul Clement, representing the RNC, said the argument is that the process be consummated or completed by Election Day. A number of the justices also raised the issue of the potential for the appearance of fraud when votes arrive and are counted after Election Day. And there wind up being shifts in vote totals and how that may impact public confidence.
It sure as heck impacts my public confidence in how the system goes. If, let's say, Jim Oberweis won Congressional 14 against one of the most liberal people in Congress right now, Lauren Underwood. He was in D.C. as an incoming freshman congressman, and they had to pull him out of class because they found 5,000 mail-in ballots that came in over the course of 2 weeks. Fought it, but he still ended up not being the congressman. As a possibility looms of laws across 29 states being overturned, our attention shifts to its Assistant Attorney General Harmeet Dillon, who passionately outlines why the chaos of extending ballot deadlines threatens the very concept of having an election day. Couldn't agree. We've got AG Harmeet Dillon. We don't have an election day anymore. We'll see what they have to say. Harmeet Dillon is incredible and a friend of the Next News.
It's caused chaos now, and a lot of people feel uncertainty and a lack of confidence in the outcome of our elections because you see the results flip. You see certain numbers on Election Day, and then in some states, like California, they can keep receiving these ballots for weeks after the election, and 8 states don't even require a postmark. And the Postal Service also tells us these days they don't postmark all the mail.
Harmeet, just really quick, you said some states don't require a postmark? I didn't even know that.
8 states. Eight states don't require a postmark, and the Postal Service itself says they no longer bother to postmark all the mail. So how do we know that these ballots were duly cast? And secondly, the rest of the world we condemn for being not as efficient and as committed to Republican or democracy form of government as we are. The rest of the world has election results on Election Day itself. Even countries that we consider to be not very civilized do that. We're one of those places where we're, I think, ignoring federal law. So the statutes in question before the court go back to 1845, and there was a vigorous discussion about the history of the Civil War when there were certain unusual procedures put into place to allow proxy voting and battlefield voting and all of that. And we can always have exceptions to our laws, of course. So, for example, there's a federal statute that specifically covers overseas voters, and that's one of the statutes that I administer here. It's called UOCAVA. So where the federal government creates certain special rules, that is not an issue. But where states are making up rules that make it looser and looser and looser, and we don't have an election day anymore, that's the problem.
So the Constitution dictates what the laws are. The federal government is the only body that can regulate federal elections. The problem is all the states have state elections. So they make up rules that apply to the state, but somehow those also apply to the federal governments. And that's when we start getting over the skis and why we need to have it all resolved. So this is the moment we've been waiting for, guys. The Supreme Court appears ready to rule that Election Day means Election Day, not election week, not election month. Justice Alito's reasoning was devastating in its simplicity. Independence Day, Memorial Day, birthday, they're all specific days. Everybody understood what Election Day meant in 1872 and 1914, and they understand it now. The only people who don't understand it are the Democrats who benefit from the chaos of extending counting periods. A 6-3 ruling could invalidate late ballot laws in up to 29 states. This is President Trump's Supreme Court delivering on election integrity. This is what winning looks like if they go through with it. So the establishment is in full panic mode tonight because their election manipulation schemes are about to come crashing down. For years, they've told us that questioning mail-in ballots was somehow dangerous or extreme. Now the Supreme Court is saying what we've known all along. Election Day should mean something. And I want to hear from you guys in the comments. Do you believe America should count all of its votes on Election Day like the rest of the civilized world? And again, all those countries that we mentioned, they all have voter ID. It's incredible, including Mexico. I want to hear your thoughts on that. Yes or no? Drop your answer below. And let's get this conversation going. Make sure you guys share this video with everybody who cares about election integrity. The mainstream media will bury this story, so don't forget to check out the Next News merch shop at shop.nextnewsnetwork.com to show your support for independent journalism. Subscribe and hit that notification bell. Also, don't forget to sign up for our text at the Raw feed so you never miss a breaking story. My name's Tom McCullough. Stay informed, stay free, and God bless.
The system controls information. Information control is power.
They don't want you to see this.
The truth only survives together. They don't want this. Share this now.